Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
11th of October 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing in the small town of Pascagoula when a UFO appears and takes them aboard for an examination. Shortly after, they returned and immediately rushed to tell their story in the local sheriff's office. Many believe their story, but others see something more fishy about the tale. Join myself and Neil here on Aliens Explored as we dive into the sometimes murky waters of the Pascagoula Abduction.
Hello listeners and welcome back to Aliens Explored, your weekly look at the mysterious skies and bottom of the ocean and hollow earth and wherever else mysteries are to be found, especially in secret government archives. I'm one of your hosts, Neil Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Stu Jackson.
Hi.
Excellent intro there.
Oh, thank you. So, I was kind of just winging it and the words are just rolling out of my mouth and
Yeah.
sometimes they make sense when I do it like that. And we were lucky this time.
That was a good one. Excellent. How you keeping?
Yeah, very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Because that's what we say in Britain, don't we? Someone says, how are you? So, well, could be worse. Worse things happen at sea.
Do you know what? People
can't complain.
We have this thing, I don't know if it's the same elsewhere in the world, but we have this, we'll say like, how are you? And if you actually, because I have this habit of like telling people how I actually am.
How annoying.
Well, I've not been feeling very well. People look at me weirdly. It's like, but of course they're too polite, being British, to say anything.
Well, thinking, well, I to be fair, I did ask him how he was. And it's funny when you go to the doctor and you walk into the doctor's surgery and he says, and how are you? And you say, I'm very well, thank you. And he and he just accepts that. He should really be saying, well, what are you doing here then?
Yeah, right, fine, next.
I thought I'd better just check.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
right.
Don't tell me how you are. You tell me your symptoms and I'll tell you how you are.
Absolutely. Okay, so I mean that's not what we're here for today. Anyway, we're not here to find out how we are.
This week we're here to talk about the Pascagoula Abduction on the Mississippi River in October 1973. As you mentioned last week, the year you were born, Stu.
The year I was born. Yeah. I wasn't even 1 year old when this happened.
Goodness me.
Yeah. Showing my age there. But yes, you had Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker fishing away. It's a nice October evening. They're fishing off this jetty.
Quite a big age difference between the two. I mean, one of them was old enough to be the other's father, wasn't he?
Well, Charles was actually Calvin's foreman where he worked.
But even so, when you're mixing with work colleagues, don't you tend to mix with people more your own age? Well, I suppose if they had a shared interest in fishing, who's to say what the age difference would be? I mean,
I'm going to point out, Neil, there's nearly 20 years between us.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, well, that's all right. That's just making an observation.
I do think, I mean, to back up what you're saying, though, I think when you're talking about a 19-year-old lad, it's a little bit
going
different.
Fishing with a 42-year-old man, you think, really? They're going off into the back and beyond together?
It's easy to think of something perhaps, negative or concerning, but I don't know. I've never heard anything in this story about anything inappropriate between them, or indeed anything appropriate.
No, I'm just covering all the
know.
bases, or perhaps judging them by my own standards. when I take young men off to go fishing, or
is it a euphemism? Let's go fishing.
Fancy another fishing trip this weekend.
No, I'm sure it wasn't anything. I mean, when people work together, it's like maybe Calvin had never been fishing. Maybe nobody had ever taught him.
Maybe.
So Charles says, "Okay, I'll take you fishing." Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know.
No, I'm sort of now that I've thought of this, I'm stuck on it now. I think what is his mates or his sort of age think he's going to be sucking up to the boss, sucking up to the foreman anyway. When they come to doling out the shifts, he'll get a better deal than other people because he's friends with the foreman.
Just in case it's a particularly British expression, sucking up to someone means kowtowing to them, being particularly friendly in hopes of
reward or favour. Yes.
Reward or favour, yeah. Brown nosing.
It's sociopathic activity, isn't it? It's
Is it?
It is. It's there's a shallowness to sociopaths, isn't there? That they all their relationships have some sort of utility for them, so they will make friends with people who are useful to them, and tread all over them the minute they decide they're not useful.
Okay, I would say yes, it's sociopathic if someone is only capable of that, but just doing it in and of itself, it might just be a strategic move.
Yeah,
from someone who is perfectly capable of other
Let's just
deeper
go. They had a common interest in fishing. They perhaps lived near each other, and they thought they would. Perhaps we're delving a bit too deeply into why these two men of different ages, one of them, the others, old enough to be the other one's dad, went off fishing together off a pier off the west bank of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi.
Yeah, a disused pier. I don't know if that's relevant, but yes.
So Pascagoula, it's pretty much on the Gulf of Mexico, isn't it? In Jackson County.
It is in Jackson County. That much I know. Yeah, and they're fishing till just after dark. Now that to me sounds wrong, but I think fishing is just It's just an excuse to have some beers with a mate. That's how I'm seeing it.
It is, but isn't there an optimum time of day to fish? I mean, don't certain fish feed at certainly predators?
Okay.
I know from watching Jaws that the time to go in the sea is not at dawn or dusk. That's when a predator is hunting.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. I'm not a fisher. I'm in fact I find fishing to be a brutal, horrible, psychopathic sport. And anyone who disagrees, and it's fine to disagree, just pop round and I'll stick a hook up the roof of your mouth and you can see how you feel then. No, I don't approve of fishing. I think that's fair to say. So I therefore know absolutely nothing about the intricacies like that, like times of day and things like that. It wouldn't even occur to me. So yeah, quite possibly.
Possibly.
I also think it's a good excuse to have a few beers.
And also, I guess like hunting. I mean, we don't really have hunting in Britain because it's a small country, and if you fire off a high velocity round, there isn't enough wilderness space to absorb it. It will fly into a populated area. It will hit someone or hit a car or whatever. We're too small and too crowded. But it would be like hunting in Central Park in New York. If you missed your target, you would hit something.
We sadly and unfortunately have fox hunting, which is a different
thing altogether. But what I mean is that there is a tradition of finding your own food. I mean, I doubt if there is anyone in the United States who really needs to hunt to feed himself or herself, but people do it. People do live in these quiet backwaters, and it's just a tradition. They could just as easily go to the store, where instead of buying ammunition for their rifles, for their hunting rifles, they could just be buying food. And I think it's a similar thing with fishing. There's a satisfaction in catching your own fish and eating it, I suppose. I assume that they catch fish to eat.
I think if it was trawled up in a net and killed very quickly and humanely, that would be one thing. But I think the methods with fish. Anyway, we're digressing. That's not what we're about. Not what we're about.
And that's not what our listeners want to hear us waffling on about.
No.
What they're interested in is what happened after dark.
Well, yes, we're 10 minutes in. We haven't even got to the interesting bit yet. So they're fishing away, and yes, they heard this whirring, whizzing sort of sound. There's these flashing blue lights as this oval-shaped craft with a dome on top, about 30 to 40 feet across, about 10 foot high, appears and floats in front of them. And then they're paralysed, it seems.
Yeah, and then these creatures came floating out of it.
3 of them, 3 small creatures with slits for mouths and claw-like pincers for hands. And take them aboard.
Well, I assume that's just like their hand was a basic robot grabber, wasn't it? Like your granny uses to pick up things that she's dropped. She's that sort of simple. Possibly.
I mean, it's hard to, it's a vague description at best. That one. But either way, they're taken on board. They're examined by what they describe as like a giant eye. And then they find themselves back on the pier again. At which point they run to the police station and or sheriff's office, as it would be, where they share their story.
And they were believed.
Very animatedly. I mean, they weren't believed initially. They were interrogated by Captain Glenn Ryder initially, who, I mean, by his own admission, he was trying to break their... He thought they were lying, so he was trying to break their story.
In fact, even when they left them alone in the room, they left the tape recorder on in the hope that maybe... or just to see if that when they thought they were alone, they would suddenly start breaking their story and saying things between themselves that they wouldn't want to be saying to a police officer. But no, they didn't. They kept up their front.
Yeah. Well, Captain Glenn Ryder definitely believed them in the end. The Jackson County sheriff, who he came round to it. I think he was quoted as saying something like, "Well, if they were making it up, they should be in Hollywood." So yeah, he was convinced by their story, and they were found to have wounds as well. Each of them had like a piercing wound on one of their arms each. But if they've been scanned for implants, I've not found anything about that, but that's just me wondering. Maybe.
But it became national news very quickly.
Yep.
A self-styled UFO investigator from Northwestern University flew down, said their story checked out. Some people called them liars. Some people suggested that Hickson, the older one, had an episode of sleep paralysis with hypnagogic hallucinations, while Parker, the younger man, was highly suggestible.
So people are desperate to find rational terrestrial solutions to these things when they happen. I mean, when we talked a few episodes ago about Travis Walton, I know you were quite shocked by the response from the townsfolk. I mean, I'm not shocked at all by it, because people will fight tooth and nail to keep hold of their existing worldview. They don't want it broken. They don't want it shattered. They don't want it's inconceivable to them for anything larger than that to be, Yeah,
but I'm just thinking I suppose most of the people I know, that if someone told them they'd been abducted in an alien spacecraft and they'd lost all track of time and they thought it was hours later when it was days later when they were delivered back. And I imagine most people would think, well, I don't know if I believe you, but I'm not going to, I might tell a few people, oh, so-and-so says this happened to him, but, I don't really. But these people really cared. These people were really desperate for them to recant and say, no, it's not true.
Something that will turn your entire belief system and your entire world upside down. No, people will fight for that very, very strongly. But back onto this particular case, again, you had people sort of very fiercely arguing the case. Now, for example, they both initially, quite early on, they were given polygraph tests.
Which they
passed. But later on, our old friend Philip Klass gets involved and gets wind of this and comes down.
Which is a red flag for me.
It is a bit, and his strongest argument was the fact that later on Hickson refused to take a polygraph test. Now, I'm going to say to you, I know you've said about polygraph tests and how they're inconclusive at best. I'm paraphrasing here, but you've certainly expressed that you don't take them as read.
Yeah, and
is that fair?
I've got the legal systems of most countries agreeing
Absolutely.
with me on that.
That's fair enough. So, if you've had an experience, like that, with a UFO abduction or something that you can't explain like that, and you're trying to convince people that what you're telling is the truth, and someone like Philip Klass comes along and says, well, we'll stick you in a polygraph test then. Would you agree to do it, knowing that it's going to hinge on a yes or no, knowing that your entire believability and your credibility will be hinged on it?
And
I can see why you might refuse.
I wonder if they knew who Philip J. Klass was. That he really was. He was described as aviation journalist and UFO skeptic. He was a professional debunker.
Yes, he was.
The Travis Walton case, he was called in like Batman to, we've got these people here who say they're abducted by aliens. They're sticking with their story. Send for Philip J. Klass because he'll break them. It says that there seems to be a conflicting account. Klass found discrepancies in Hickson's story and noted that Hickson refused to take a polygraph exam conducted by an experienced examiner. But it says in the other article that they both passed the polygraph test.
So they had initially passed polygraph tests. And later on, Philip Klass comes along and says, "Right, I'm going to force you to have another polygraph test."
So presumably the polygraph test that they'd done before wasn't acceptable, and that's here's my problem with polygraph tests, that it comes down to who's doing it. And so Klass comes along and says, yes, I set great store by polygraph tests, but only if the person that I know and trust is interpreting the results. I'm not prepared to accept results that have been interpreted by someone who I don't know. There's that subjectivity to polygraph tests that
there is a degree of subjectivity. I think, like, again, going back to the Travis Walton case, where you've got 6 independent people each passing a polygraph test, that's a statistically different thing. But I agree. On their own, on individual cases, yes, they need to be taken cautiously. But what I'm saying is, if your entire credibility hangs on a positive result from a polygraph test, I can see why you would refuse to take one. But Philip Klass took that refusal as evidence that he was making it up.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This is what I think of polygraph tests. Are you familiar with the term?
I think we know what you think of polygraph tests.
Are you familiar with the term scientistic?
I've not heard that term.
It's not scientific. It's scientistic is where you take something and you dress it up in the trappings of science, so that, for instance, in psychology, you would make sure that people wear white coats and carry clipboards and do all these sort of experiments and whatever. So you can say, well, you've got an experienced psychologist that I can interview this person, I can have a conversation, and I can make my own judgment. You know, I'm an expert on body language, I'm an expert on whatever, that I could testify in a court that I believe that they were either telling the truth or I would believe that they were lying, probably with a greater degree of confidence than a polygraph test. But what they like about the polygraph test is that someone can come into court with this great ream of computer printout with all these sort of lines on it that they've marked and say, oh yes, when they asked him this was his reaction, and that shows this, that, and the other. It shows what it shows is whatever I tell you it shows. That's the problem with it.
Okay, so that's not the case with a polygraph test. They do get misnomered as lie detectors. That is not what they are. What they are, they test and they monitor physiological reactions to emotional stimulus.
Yes.
That's the basic, and it is a very scientific process and principle. However, it is not a lie. If you think of it in terms of a lie detector, then yeah, it's going to fall down every time, because none of the actual scientific people who use them will call it a lie detector. In fact, they will go out of their way to say it is not a lie detector.
But they're covering their arse, because they know full well. They know full well that as far as a jury of lay people are concerned, they will believe it's a lie detector.
But it's
and they can say, you know, if the evidence gets questioned, they say, well, no, actually, it's not a lie detector. It just measures the physiological responses to a question. But as far as the jury is concerned, and they know this, they don't kid me that they've tried to convince the jury otherwise. They know that as far as the jury is concerned, this is a lie detector. What this graph shows is that this guy lied in response to that question. They know that
would be down to the lawyer, not the polygraph tester, and I think you know, casting aspersions on that whole area of science, which is, I think it's a valid area of science. I think it's a misunderstood area of science, and it's a misused area of science. I don't believe they should be used as evidence in a court of law.
No.
I'm very, very firm on that, because what it measures is stress levels. And if a person is particularly stressed by a question, I'll give you an example. I was once asked by an ex-girlfriend. I did not know at the time. She had a hand on my wrist and she could feel my pulse at the time. And she asked me out of the blue if I was having an affair. And I wasn't. And the question so shocked me, so startled me, that it affected my heartbeat. And she took that heartbeat fluctuation that she felt, that she noticed, as a negative response. And that's the problem. You know, it's and that's why I say, you know, it measures the reaction to emotional stimuli,
which she took to be a lie.
Yes, she did. And that's where polygraph tests get misused. But it's not a lie detector test, but it is a legitimate science, and I will defend them quite.
But I would be willing to bet. I mean, you've mentioned that people have been tried and convicted and sentenced to death and executed on the basis of polygraph evidence. Well, I would bet you that the juries that convicted them and whoever sentenced them believed it was because the polygraph showed that they had lied.
Yes, but that would be because of the way the lawyers presented it, not because of the polygraph tester themselves.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, that it's because it's so commonly accepted that it's a lie detector that it is. to all intents and purposes. As far
you
as
need to blame the media for that, not the science.
blame the media, blame the lawyers, blame everyone. But as far as anyone's concerned, it's a lie detector. If you fail a polygraph test, it's because you lied.
Anyway, we've gone really sideways.
Sorry, I've got to think about polygraph tests.
I know you have.
Polygraph tests are to me what crop circles are to you.
That leads into exactly what I'm trying to say, though, is Philip Klass tells Charles Hickson that his whole credibility is going to rely on the results of this polygraph test. Now, if you're in Charles Hickson's place, wouldn't you refuse the polygraph test?
Especially if I knew who Philip Klass was.
Exactly. So, it is
I don't know if he did know who he was. But
it is understandable that Charles refused it. That's what I'm saying. I can understand. It isn't an indication of guilt. It's not an indication that he's making it up. But that is exactly how Philip Klass twisted it. He said, because he's refused, he must be hoaxing it. Yeah. And that was his evidence. Yes, there were some discrepancies in his story, but the trouble is when you have a traumatic event like that, you don't always remember it absolutely specifically verbatim.
But Parker did. He didn't change his story, but he certainly changed his approach to it. That whereas Hickson, the older guy, he was well known in the community. Perhaps he seemed to handle the media crush, and he would recount the experience to anyone who would listen. He went on television, he went on a couple of shows. He later published a book. But the younger guy, Parker, he just arrived in Pascagoula from an even smaller town, and his plan was to earn some money before returning home to get married. So he then just turned around and told the media that actually he'd passed out and couldn't remember what had happened. He just didn't want to... I can
understand why someone might want to say that.
Yeah, it's perfectly understandable. If the media are in your face all the time, the easiest thing to do is just say, well, actually, no, I don't really know what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I have some slight issues with their story myself. When they describe these creatures, I do get a little bit hung up on them having claws, because in order to kind of, as part of our evolution, sort of opposable thumbs have been quite an essential element when it comes to sort of making and developing tools. Although, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking actually he might... So the traditional grey alien is often depicted as having 3 fingers and a thumb, but they're very, very long fingers. And I suppose seen very quickly in a shocked state, they might look like claws or pincers or something like that. So I don't know, maybe.
Well, not if they were robots of some kind. I mean, we've said
who's suggesting they're robots?
No one's suggesting they're robots, but that's what a robot grabber looks like, isn't it? It's just they've sent a robot out to just get them and bring them in. Okay. I mean, what the human presence on Mars is robots, and the hands are just grabbers, aren't they? They're just...
That's true, but already, I think of... like Lost in Space. I'm kind of fixated now with that image in my head. The robot from that.
Actually, no. The word robotic was.
They described like robotic-like slits in their mouths.
Robot-like slits in their mouths. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a
C-3PO.
Like a Cyberman or something.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Just a little oval of a mouth.
Yeah. I'm picturing almost like a letterbox.
Yeah,
sort of shape, but yeah,
or like,
small,
like Bender on Futurama. That's
yeah,
and maybe it was that they sent out 3 Benders who could sort of fly out and get them.
Okay, well, anyway, we've hit that point in the show when we summarise what our thoughts. So So what do you think of their story, though? Polygraphs to one side. Let's not talk about that again, at least in this episode. But yeah, what do you believe them?
I don't know. I really don't know. They were consistent with their story. They certainly didn't get rich off the back of it. They got publicity, but the kind of publicity that only a lunatic would want.
Well, that is actually a goal of many hoaxers. There are abduction hoaxers out there, and yeah, the attention, the publicity, that's what they do it for. I don't think anybody does it to get rich, or if they do, they're idiots. But yeah. There have been known hoaxes.
Yeah, I'm interested in the story, but obviously it lacks any corroborating evidence, and I can't accept it as absolutely true. But I also don't have any particular agenda to want to debunk it. I'm perfectly happy to believe that it's true, but I don't know that it's true. If you see what I mean.
I do, yes. But in your heart, do you think they're telling the truth? Without agenda one way or another. What's your belief?
Something happened to them. I think something did happen. Some kind of traumatic event. But I really... Yeah, I just have to say, I have to accept their story. Obviously, that if that's what you say that happened, that I can't say that it didn't happen.
Fair enough.
But I also can't say for sure that it did happen. I've just got your word for it, and I've no reason to disbelieve them.
Yeah, I'm not too dissimilar from you on that. I mean, I do believe they've had an extraterrestrial abduction. I'm saying extraterrestrial, otherworldly, because we don't know necessarily that they are extraterrestrial, these beings. But yeah, I definitely believe they've had an encounter with something otherworldly. I also wonder if their story has, or if their recollection has become sort of a bit blurred over time. And we've all done it, where, we've had some sort of life experience, and then in the pub over a few beers, when you're telling the story over and over again, it gets a little bit bigger and grander and what have you. But no, I think there's definitely something to this story. Definitely something. But what do you think, listeners, is Charles Hickson's and Calvin Parker's story? Is it absolutely true? Is there more to it even than we're aware of? Or do you think they just made it up and it's a load of bunkum? Do let us know by the usual means. Facebook and Twitter by searching Aliens Explored. Or you can email us, aliensexplored@gmail.com. We love to hear what you think about these stories. Don't forget to join us next time. So, I mean, you think we were going back a long way in time with this one, was for 1973, Neil. Next week, we're going back to 1561. And we'll be looking at a UFO battle over the skies of Nuremberg.
Wow.
That's a bit unusual, isn't it?
I'll look forward to reading up on that one, yes.
Fantastic. And I'm going to be looking forward to it as well. Hopefully you'll be looking forward to it as well, listeners. In the meantime, keep watching those floats on the river and the skies, because they did, don't they?
When you catch fish, yeah, that's okay. You got one.
Yeah. Or don't go fishing, because it's but anyway, keep watching the skies regardless. Take care for now.
Catch you next time. Bye bye. Aliens Explored is a Fecal Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter or Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit us on aliensexplored.com.